Today, we're welcoming to the channel Marta.
Hello.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, and where you grew up?
Yes, I'm Portuguese. I was born and raised in the northern coast of Portugal. Um, I'm from an average Portuguese family. I have a younger sister. My childhood, I know because everyone talks a little bit about the childhood, and later we can relate with the spiritual work. My childhood was a bit difficult on the emotional side because my parents were constantly arguing. So it was a bit rough, but I was an happy child. Apart from that, my mother used to say, I still say that still says that I could entertain myself alone for hours, just building little houses with dolls and everything. um, and I was a very curious child. I was that type of child that kept asking, why is the sky blue? Why is this like this? Why is this like that? And I started showing some abilities for arts, for drawing and painting at school, but I was a good student, and around the eighth grade, I started studying physical chemistry, or this type of class was introduced on the eighth grade, and I was hooked when the teacher rolled up the sleeves and started explaining that the solid matter that we see, the table, the chairs, the walls, are not really solid. That matter is discontinuous, and that there were empty spaces between the molecules and the atoms. And I was like amazed. So amazed that I became like a five student. At that time, at the eighth grade, we have grades from one to five. And because of that, when I reached the ninth grade, my parents and teachers recommended that I should continue chemistry and leave aside the arts because it was not promising as a good future. Yeah, so suddenly I was studying specific classes of physical chemistry. I did a university degree in chemistry. Then I did a PhD in chemistry. And even later on, I even decided I was already working and I decided to do a master degree in chemical engineering. So a lot of studying in my life, but I grew up being unable to deal with my emotions because my family environment was really a bit unstable or unsafe, and my parents couldn't express affection properly for each other and even maybe with their children because they were always so tense, so nervous and arguing. So I grew up to be a teenager with a lot of difficulties to deal with my intense emotions.
Did you know that as such that there was emotional repression going on in you, or like was it something at that point you wanted to address or understood, or?
I started noticing when we start thinking about boyfriends and feeling attracted for a boy, and that I really couldn't deal with the intensity of the emotions. And it became clearer in the early 20s that in my 20s, yeah, I couldn't just, couldn't have a proper relationship because it was too much. Like for me, a relationship was suffering because that's what I saw in my parents. And all the intensity of the emotions, the attraction, the maybe the desire to control, the attachment, the fear of rejection. And I would even create the situations that would would actually confirm the rejection, but it was so much suffering around emotions. So I became a person that was very mental, and quite bad at emotions. And that was the start of my mental suffering, let's say.
I can relate to a lot of that myself. I mean, I can really relate to a lot of that emotional landscape growing up and the inability to form normal bonds with people and feeling the intensity and not knowing what to do with it and not even knowing what all was there. But there's like fear of rejection and confusion and wanting control. And like there's so much going on. And it's so intense, but without a normal emotional internal landscape to feel somewhat relaxed in intense situations, it's just untenable. And so I think a lot of people make that next step is which is like, oh, well, I'll just live up here and somehow push that down or not address that part of my life because we can succeed in the mental realm. We can become rewarded for being intelligent, smart, as scholars and all that. And so you can kind of set your life up that way and just sort of sweep the rest under the rug for a while.
Yes, yes. So I had this intellectual curiosity, um, but it was very difficult to deal with emotions. I had stable relationships with friends,
Mhm.
female and male friends, but romantic relationships were not the case, and I grew up like that, and I really didn't manage to have a stable relationship, and up to a point that I just gave up. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm better off alone because there's no way I can be happy, with a partner. So I continued. My life was mostly focused on career, studies, and actually the interest for spirituality came quite late because I think I was over 33 or around 35.
Mhm.
Again, because let's say there was disappointments in life and even in career, because I did a PhD and I had plans to be a professor, and I didn't manage to enter in the career of professor in a national university. The competition was already high. I mean, there were more PhDs than available positions.
Mhm.
So I had to compromise, and I went to the industry.
Mhm.
And that was another disappointment in my life. And all of these just build up. And also in my early 30s, I started thinking I also wanted to be a mother, but I could not imagine myself to be, a wife. And all of these started to build up. And only then I started to feel the need to relax a little more, to find activities that could bring me in a more calm state. So I remember I used to attend to do gymnastics
Mhm.
every week. And at a certain point, I started changing from, more intense gymnastics to yoga classes.
Mhm.
It was a bit gradual, but after 1, 2 years, I was having yoga classes. And then the curiosity came to do meditation retreats. I tried a couple of them nearby where I worked, but I was not very satisfied with the philosophy that was being, let's say, presented. And in 2008, I finally met a good teacher,
Mhm.
which was born in India, but was living in the United States for since his early adulthood. And he came from an ashram nearby New York, but he was a musician, basically. He was a sitar player, and he would come to Europe and do European tours with for meditation with sitar music, meditative
Mhm.
music, to go deeper in meditation. And as soon as I met him, there was this chemistry or this alignment of my point of view with the philosophy that he was offering. And I liked that he was very knowledgeable, but he was also very objective. It was the
Mhm.
first time that I learned about Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Belief, and other modern authors that study from a scientific point of view the topic of spirituality. And I remember in my early, so I was around 36 when I met him. And I remember I read the book The Power of Now from Eckhart Tolle soon after I met this teacher, Rupert. And reading that book produced a shift in me, but it was not enough to bring the direct experience of a basic awakening, of seeing there was no self. But it was quite significant. Just reading the book created a space, and I realized that my life situation was not me. And from there, it was just an adventure. And it has been 15 years until this shift, or we can call it basic awakening, happened just last March. And it was really amazing.
So what sorts of, maybe just summarize, what sorts of practices or things did you try between reading that book and when whatever happened this year or just last year? What were you just trying different types of meditation practices, retreats, inquiry, or what were you involved in?
Um, well, I was quite new in spirituality when I met Rupert. So these retreats lasted for around 8 years because unfortunately he passed away in 2017. He was 86 years old.
Oh wow.
But these meditation retreats were very important in my development. We did an open meditation, although he also gave us good information that we should kind of observe the thoughts. We are not the thoughts, and it helped to create this gap between the thoughts and between what we were and the thoughts.
Yeah.
And doing 4-day retreats two times a year really enabled me to go deeper and deeper. And because I have kind of this romantic or artistic side, the music setting was just perfect for me. The music was kind of Indian folk music played with sitar. He said it was a special type of music for meditation because it worked like a nook. We started giving attention to the music and then it dropped and we were in a deep state of meditation in silence. It was very important. But I remember he used to talk that he lived in an ashram outside of New York for 10 years with his wife. And he used to talk a lot about his guru. The person who founded this ashram was Indian too. He was a doctor that at a certain point in life dropped his career and founded two ashrams and dedicated the rest of his life to spirituality and guiding people. And every time he used to talk about his guru, his eyes used to shine, and he said he was so connected, he knew everything about us. And from there, it was born the desire to meet a living guru, something that I have never thought of before. And that led me to go to Barcelona and meet an Indian guru called Amma, the hugging saint, because I saw a documentary on TV about her and I thought she might be my guru. And that led me to a big adventure because I also traveled to India several times and I visited different parts of India and I also visited this ashram in Kerala. And being around Amma for some time, I used to visit just for 1-2 weeks. But at a certain point, I was I quitted my job that I had at the industry. I was really unhappy at that job, and along those 8 years of meditation, I felt more and more disconnected with that type of environment, and finally I had to finish that job. And I worked in that place for 14 years. It was a long time. So I decided to make a break and went to India just after
Mm.
that. I didn't know for how long. I just bought a one-way ticket. And I stayed there 4 months in the ashram. And actually, I had a couple of roommates, and they said they were going to join the group to on tour around India. So it was my biggest adventure in life. To go on a big tour in Indian buses with no
Mhm.
air conditioned and traveled all the northern Indian and South India with Amma and about 700 people.
Wow.
But yeah, but that was a big learning to live in the present moment. I can
Mhm.
tell you, the first couple of weeks when I was in the ashram, I kept thinking about my life situation. What will I do from now on? And as soon as I started the tour, a couple of days later, I just forgot all my life completely
Mm.
because it was such a different environment, so distant from my home country and from everything I knew, that after a couple of days I was just living in the moment, and it was amazing. I think
Mm.
it was really a balm for my soul.
Mm.
And so I did it. I was touring for about 1 month and a half until I got to a point that I really fed up. I was fed up. Like, this is too
Mhm.
hot. The food is too spicy. I just need a comfortable bed. I'm going home. And I went
Mhm.
home, and there was also this desire of doing the USA tour,
Mhm.
which started in June the same year. Um, and people told me, no way, they already have the regular people that go with Ama on tour, and you never did that tour, and you are not American, you won't have a chance. But just a couple of weeks before, an Indian lady called me and said, I had a volunteer that just dropped off, and would you like to join me and go on tour with Ama? And I said, yes, yes, I go. So it was another adventure, not so joyful as in India,
Mm.
because it was really rough. We just stayed 3 days on each place, and
Oh.
we were not given enough time to sleep. So after some time, I was on the limits of exhaustion.
Mm.
We were supposed to sleep on bus. The distances are huge. We went from the west coast to the east coast,
Mm.
and finished in Canada, in Toronto. But the distances are huge, and sometimes we would work because we were supposed to do volunteer work to help set up and the the things for the program. Um, and sometimes they expected us to sleep in the bus, but it was too cold, no
Mm.
sleep. So I was deprived from sleep for almost 1 month, and I was really exhausted. But it was also a great experience that I will never forget.
Yeah.
It was the first time that I visited different parts of America, and I was amazed by it. But after that, well, going forward, after that, I returned to Portugal, to my hometown, and I kept living in the present moment for over 1 year. But I also had to be grounded and started applying for new jobs. So I
Mm.
had enough money, my savings, to just to live, enjoy life. And 1 year, more than 1 year, passed in with these adventures. But then I had to go back to work, and I applied to different jobs, including one in Stockholm, Sweden. And surprisingly, I was chosen.
Mm.
It was very aligned with my previous experience, and I decided to go to Stockholm for 2 years and a half, just before the pandemics.
Mm.
So it was a bit rough. I was in kind of a vibration. Everything is nice. Everything is great. And then changing country with different language,
Mhm.
the difficulty to find accommodation. It was like a big, big jar of cold water on my head.
I'll bet it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was a big shock in my system. But yeah, being around Amma, she has a lot of Shakti. I don't know how to explain. She has an
Mhm,
energy field,
mhm,
and I could feel it. So there was a lot of, I would call now, energetic experiences.
mhm.
Some people may call it mystic experiences, but they were experiences.
Yeah.
So they had a beginning and an end, and it didn't happen this direct experience of seeing there was no self. So it was beautiful. I kept those memories, but they were experiences, and after that, obviously, during my time in the ashram, there was meditation every day, devotional singing, and it was the perfect setting to go higher, let's say, um, in terms of energy. Um, but the shift, the direct looking didn't happen then. Um, so later I went to Stockholm. I worked there 2 years and a half. And even before I came to Portugal, just before pandemics, a friend of mine, which I met during these tours in Ama, called me and told me there is this energetic healing modality that she was learning that was really good to accelerate awakening. And she was a quite advanced student already, and she said from her own experience she would advise me to try it. And that modality is called vortex healing, and
Mhm.
is being taught by a teacher called Rick Weinman. And he was also a person that goes to Ama's ashram. So there is a lot of people from that circle attending these classes. And I started attending these classes in 2019. I haven't been doing meditation retreats lately, just because I haven't had the chance to do them. I did a Vipassana retreat in a new center, not too far away from where I live, just 2 hours and a half, and it was great. 10 days in meditation. It was really my first experience of a longer retreat. It was amazing. Uh, but apart from that, I started doing these courses of vortex healing, and uh, the basics is that the teacher who is advanced, who is in a more advanced awakened state, can direct intention to promote an energetic healing, a release of basically a release of conditioning and emotional scars, let's say, that
Mhm.
sits in our system, our body, and our energetic system. And basically, I think that's what these awakened teachers do, even Amma. Basically, that's what happens with advanced, let's say, spiritual people. Um, yeah, so it's difficult to explain these things. I'm a very septic person because
Mhm.
I'm not, I have had energetic experience, but I'm not the typical psychic person that can
Yeah.
read. I cannot read the problem of a person. I have colleagues that can read if the person has a virus or if has a problem in this organ or that organ. So I'm very skeptical because I have a scientific background.
Mhm.
And sometimes I question things like, should I be here? I don't sense anything.
Yeah.
But I did sense a lot of transformation.
Mhm.
It helped to strengthen my my energetic system a lot. And I released a lot of emotional pain.
Mm.
Amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I was completely amazed. For instance, even a feeling of longing, I released that, at least a large amount. And
Mm.
even now, the idea of a romantic love does not have the same meaning anymore.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
there is no longing, no attachment. But
Mhm.
these things did not happen only after I started having these energetic courses. It started over. It happened over the 15 years.
Yeah.
I started feeling a certain emotional detachment
Mhm.
or non-identification with emotions, more balanced. But really, what has happened in the past 2 3 years with vortex healing has been really incredible.
Yeah.
And this direct experience of seeing there was a self, there was no self, a separate self, let's call it this
Yeah. Can you
way.
bring us back to the beginning of next year? What led up to that?
Yeah, it happened. Well, it happened like this. I started having these more advanced awakening classes in November. I had the first one in November 2021, called Core Veil class, where the teacher explains it's where we were supposed to lose this identification with the mind. But it didn't happen. It lifted a big weight, but I was working in an organization at that time, and I was having a lot of conflict with a colleague. That it was power struggles. It was always, there was constant discussion, and I could not relax. I remember I there was like a big weight that came out, and I went for a walk after the class, and I was thinking, what was all that about? I mean, those discussions at work. But at that point, I had already informed the organization that I was quitting because I could not handle so much stress. It was really a bad experience after my previous experience of working in Stockholm. I quitted that organization, and then I had a second awakening class in March. And after the class, because the shift usually don't happen during inquiry or during a class, it happens afterwards. Just I can't say, but 1 2 days after, I woke up and there was no self. I felt like an empty shell. It was really like a shock. There was wonderment, bewilderment, and I was like, there is nothing inside, nothing. Now after I have read about it, I, maybe I have even released the eighth fetter,
Mhm.
because I really felt an empty shell for like 3 to 5 weeks,
Mhm.
and there was no reactivity. There was just wonderment. I didn't know very well how to communicate with other people. I mean, life happened just as the same. Like I was eating and sleeping. No one noticed at home. But I remember I had a social dinner in a local organization just 5 weeks after the shift, and I didn't know very well how it would go, the social conversation. And I was a bit shocked when I realized that to keep a social conversation, my words were not very enlightened. So there was a lot of conditioning in place, and it was kind of a shock. Like I had this increased awareness, but anyway, what came out of my mouth was still not aligned with that
Mhm.
level of awareness. There was still conditioning, and automatically there were words coming out that were not very enlightened. And I remember I asked, how can we just speak from a place of, awareness? But it takes time.
Yeah.
It does
Yep.
not happen immediately, and this I also felt a big physical relief
Hmm.
when the shift happened, and I felt light, actually an empty shell, and I couldn't feel joy because I think there was a bit of a shock. It was everything so new and so different that I still couldn't laugh at it. It was serious.
Hmm.
It was quite serious. And this happened in the end of March and beginning of the summer. I still had some questions, some doubts in my mind, like how will I have, how will I do decisions now? How will I do choices? Because I noticed that I speak and there is still conditioning.
Hmm.
I'm not totally I'm not totally aligned with awareness, and the environment around vortex healing doesn't give us the opportunity to discuss these things. We only have time during class with the teacher, and for me, this vortex healing comes with a baggage of a bit of mystic
Hmm.
concepts like avatars, um, magic, divinity,
Hmm.
and it's not totally aligned with the way I am, because coming from a scientific background, I would prefer a neutral language like the field of potentiality, the ultimate reality, and I couldn't find the answers in this circle. I started searching and I found a group in the Facebook called Finding Awakening
Hmm.
that you probably have met already.
Hmm.
And this lady, Christiane Michelberger, she's a German. She was teaching a way of inquiry to see through the 10 fetters according to a Buddhist method. And I started reading and I started finding answers to my questions at that point. And I contacted her. I asked if she could guide me through the 10 fetters. She was quite busy, but she pointed me another person living in Italy that has been guided by her and has been through the 10 fetters. And she also recommended me to do the inquiry using the forum called Unleashed, Liberation Unleashed,
Hmm.
which is free. And I asked them if they could guide me through reactivity, because I saw from Christian's teachings that that will be the next step. And at Liberation Unleashed, they told me they just guided people on the first fetter or
Hmm.
first three fetters of seeing no self, no control, no agent. And anyway, I asked there if I could have a guide, and the lady came up and I explained the situation, and she told me I can only guide you on the first three fetters. But anyway, would you like to try it? And I went through the inquiry, and it was really, at that point, it was really helpful. This happened last August. It was really helpful to relax in my experience
Hmm.
because I had these mental doubts. What will I do now with the decisions? And because it happened spontaneously, not through inquiry, and that raised some questions in my mind. Yeah, and that inquiry finished in the end of August, and in the beginning of September I started having really heavy reactivity, like
Mhm.
it was really notorious in my life because I was not working, but I'm living with my parents for the past couple of years because I sold my apartment in another town.
I just want to reflect for anyone watching this that this the way this played out for you is pretty typical of a what I would call a deep awakening. So someone who has a really profound deep awakening often really does experience no self. They experience the I wouldn't call it the afetter, but I would call it the clear, undeniable insight that there absolutely is no self. There never could be a self, and so forth. And often for several months after, that person, even to me, looks quite enlightened. There's just it's almost like there's just nothing there. There's no conditioning or very, very subtle conditioning. But then usually a few months, several months later, that's exactly what you start to feel is the reactivity itself, the energetics underneath it, but the struggle and all that, you don't even know what it is, but you feel it crowding back in, and it's like, whoa, what in the heck is this? And so it's reasonably typical when you have a very kind of deep awakening like you did that this occurs, and then you can come back and address these areas.
Yes, it lasted. I mean, the honeymoon that people talk about, the honeymoon lasted 5 months
Hmm.
with very little reactivity. It was summertime. I was just enjoying my life, feeling happy and light. I noticed, however, that there was conditioning, there was judgment, light one, but it was there.
Hmm.
In the beginning of the first or second week of September, I started being so irritated. I could not even explain. Because I was living with my parents, I was arguing with them every day. And they are over 80 now. And so I would get irritated because of miscommunication with my mother, because she can't hear from one ear, she has a device on the other ear. But even so, sometimes there are miscommunication, and I would really be irritated sometimes that wouldn't have any other explanation that this new phase that was coming up. And I would feel irritated just watching my father eating. It was really incredible. And at that point, I spoke with this guy that Christian gave me the contact. She's called Maria. She's English, but she's living in Italy.
Hmm.
And we had a conversation, and she offered to guide me in the beginning of November. Yeah, I contacted her, and in the beginning of November, we started looking at reactivity. And I can tell you that there was, in the beginning, there was a bit of confusion how it works. But we went straight to the point. I used the sentences. So this inquiry on reactivity was done based on a method that is on internet. It was developed by Kevin Shanilek, who also lives in the States, and she wrote it on a public website called Simply the Scene. I think
Hmm.
it's called this way. Um, and we should choose a sentence in the negative that phrases what we are reacting to, and then intone the sentence and feel the body sensations and find the gap between the body sensations and the emotions or reactions that arise, and looking for the bridge to see that there was no connection between uncomfortable body sensations and reactions. And I can tell you it was quite difficult in November because I went straight to a sentence related with my father, which was part of the conditioning I received in my childhood that was affecting my behavior today. And it was very easy to see the body sensations, but it was very difficult to find the gap because,
Hmm.
reaction would start immediately. And I had a lot of difficulty to find the gap. Where is the gap? It's not a physical thing.
Right.
And I immediately started feeling a lot of avoidance to look deeper. it became very obvious that there was avoidance to do the inquiry.
Well, that's the thing about this. Well, that's the thing about this area. This material is so fascinating to me. It's where the rubber meets the road after awakening, and it's something you really don't want to overlook, but many people do. But it's by definition where you don't want to look. It's exactly where you don't want to look. The whole ego structure is built on not looking in this one place that now you have to go look. So it's quite wonky at first. It's tricky, it's sticky, it's slippery, but with precision, dedication, patience, you can get to it. Yeah.
Yes, it's painful, and I think it was painful. But I should tell that after a couple of weeks of looking at it, I could not have reactions to that phrase anymore, and I was not sure at that time if it was avoidance or if it was a reduction in reactivity. But honestly, I wouldn't reply to Maria every day. There was some avoidance, but it was notorious that all that irritation that I was feeling every day just disappeared. And I even told my guide, now I find funny the way my father eats. When before I was just feeling so irritated, and now I find it a bit childish or innocent or
Mhm.
whatever. It's not causing any reaction anymore. Um, but this brought another issue: is that it was like a flashlight on my childhood traumas. It came to the front of my awareness, this relation between my childhood traumas and my present conditioning, my present behavior. Uh, and I even asked in the Vortex healing group among my colleagues, what did you do with the trauma? Because I wanted just to eliminate trauma once for all. What can I do? I'm a typical person who do lists and plans. I'm going to do this and that and that. I'm a doer. And I was a bit lost in this doer role. So I started inquiring, what have you done to deal with your childhood trauma? Some people said I used psychotherapy, I used energetic healing, I used tapping, trembling,
Mhm.
fascia release, all types of therapies. And they say, well, the best is to combine some of them and just look for the best technique to release trauma. But early in December, I was reading a poem on Facebook again by another awakened person that I found on the Facebook group of Finding Awakening. I was reading this poem that was about the past memories being a broken mirror that, if we bring into the future, just bleed us in pain, and that the solution or the balm of healing was in the present moment. And it just brought an insight. It was an instant insight. Oh my God, I was being carried away with this trauma history.
Mhm.
And I recentered, just reading that poem, it was so strong. I recentered in the present moment. And since then, trauma history just disappeared. It doesn't mean that the conditioning cleared. I suppose it's still there, but it my mind story, all these
Mhm.
thought stories, just cleared instantly.
Mhm.
And after that, I had another experience on the 1st of January that enabled me to see the gap between the body sensations and reactions. And I just took a look at it and I couldn't find anything connecting the sensations with the reaction, but it was a spontaneous experience. I was not inquiring on purpose. I was having this light pain on my left arm because I suffered an hernia in the beginning of February. And I mostly recovered from it. But that day I was watching movies on TV, and suddenly I started my left arm kind of, pulsating with a light pain. And when I went to bed, without any situation that could justify, I started having these thoughts about my father, how he was a bit about his behavior that was not so acceptable for me. And at the same time, I felt like I was awareness. Where does these thoughts come from? So I was not identified with the thoughts. I just saw them arising, and I was like, what the hell are they coming from? I didn't have any argument with my father. They just came with no
Mhm.
reason.
Mhm.
And they wanted to build up and bring again this pain. And I was, no, 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 I don't want to go that way. It takes too much energy. And suddenly there was no reactions. The thoughts disappeared and I fell asleep. And it was a big, for me, it was a big step forward in the reactivity. I noticed that the two sentences I have used so far don't cause any reaction at all. But I
Mhm.
cannot tell you if reactivity is gone. I'm on the watch. And it's something, I suppose that I will have to do this process with different traumas,
Mhm.
different aspects of my personality that cause reaction. But I can tell you, it has been so fast. I'm in a completely different position as I was last September, and I even started noticing that a new fetter is opening, because I was describing this experience to my guide Maria, and when I read my words, I say, "Look, I'm not the observer either.
Mm.
There is an identity here that is popping out, like I was identified with the observer of the thoughts,
Mhm.
and I realize now it's another level of identity
Yeah.
that it's coming up, and it's just funny now, because I understand now why Buddhists call it the stream. Like after the first awakening, it's really like a stream, and I
Mhm.
cannot come out of it now. It's
Mhm.
happening. It's
Yeah.
happening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a completely natural process, and so maybe the work of this is to see where we're trying to get in its way. And what's gotten its way the whole time is the self structure and all its aspects, including the dualistic structure and then the reactive structure. But it's just like that, where once reactivity has calmed significantly or completely, the dualistic perceptions are much more accessible. And sometimes they just fall down. Sometimes they're just like gone. And other times it's like a little bit of work to fish out, what's actually going on in perception. But yeah, what a cool story and unfolding for and especially in the last year.
Yes, it has been quite intense, and I've not been working since February.
Mhm.
And I really think that's very important, to be in a relaxed environment, to allow things to happen.
Yeah.
After everything that happened to me in the past months, I wouldn't be able to handle a full-time job and all these experiences,
Mm.
because I tend to stress a bit with work. Um, and I think it didn't happen before because I was stressed,
Mm.
and I need time to just to live in the moment and to allow things to happen. And obviously, there is still a lot of there will be always uncertainty. I'm at this point that I kind of don't want to do anymore what I used to do, but I still don't
Mm.
know what will I do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and but I'm relaxed in that
Mm.
uncertainty. Some days I feel like I'm going to write poems. I read some poems on internet and then I say, "Oh, mines are so basic. I'm comparing. I'm still not really a poet." And other days the inspiration is not there, and it has been uh, like the word. It's like a dynamic experience.
Dynamic.
Yeah, it's not a continuous state of presence.
Yeah.
I still have these questions, and I started looking for other people that also have this clear, let's say, clean perspective on awakening without, let's say, spiritual concepts attached.
Hmm.
And I found you on Facebook just before Christmas, and it's incredible.
Oh.
Yeah, it's. I found your videos. I haven't had time to see them all. There are too many, but it has been very helpful to try to understand what's happening
Mm.
with people that have been through the process.
Yeah, it is very helpful, and I guess I just want to acknowledge your just complete total commitment to this unbinding, let's call it, and you're doing awesome. I mean, what a wonderful way this has played out over the last year or so, and it's just going to continue to clarify. So, yeah,
I hope so. I'm really devoted to, committed to go till the end. And
yeah,
as I told you, I would like to see through the 10 fetters this year.
yeah,
It might
yeah,
not be possible, it might happen,
yeah.
uh, but it just shows that I'm really determined to go
Hmm.
through all the experiences, even if it takes to wait a little longer to think again about work and
Mm.
to have a how will I live and what will I do, and I prefer to experience the transformation now and then later see what comes
Yeah,
spontaneously.
I think that's the right order. That's what I recommend, especially once you've gone this far. Just get it done. Life will take care of everything.
I always had this great faith in life. It's my personality. I think I have
Mhm.
certain aspects of personality that are really helpful in the spiritual path, let's call it this path. I'm optimistic, and I really have this unending
Mhm.
faith in life that will show
Yeah.
me. I say
Mhm.
life is my greater
Yeah.
teacher. It because I see synchronicities, and I see sometimes events that are opportunities for change or for learning. So I always try to understand what's happening. This happened to me for a reason, and see the good side of the experience. And it has been a huge transformation since when I began, when I was about 35. It has been a huge transformation for me. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you something if I can. Did you manage to see through the 10 fetters and have a regular job as a doctor?
Yeah, I work full time.
Yeah, it must
Yeah.
have been crazy.
It's been a very interesting life. Yeah. Um, the I will say this, even after the subtle self sense is gone, which you are calling the eighth fetter essentially in that model, um, it's not, that doesn't mean everything's over. And Christiane talks about this as well and so forth. But the beauty of it is that it's a spontaneous process after this. And what I find is that the clarity at subtler and subtler and subtler levels just keeps going. And so what I find is that things like very subtle beliefs that are not even based on any kind of personal belief or reactivity or anything, they're more like social beliefs, those get seen through. And then the change is, or the effect of that is, that it allows access to this process we're talking about to more and more people, in simpler and simpler terms. So for me, it's just become about that. There's really, what else are you going to do other than make this more accessible to people who are interested in it, who are interested in. So yeah, at some point it's just not about me anymore at all. It just doesn't even matter. When people ask me, what's it like for you, or how is it for you? Who cares about how it is for me? How is it going to be for you? I'm only interested in facilitating it for others, because, at some point it will come to a final end for the apparent individual. But how this carries itself forward beyond that, as the wheel of the Dharma turns, is astounding. And the clarity just gets deeper and deeper, and we see more and more people waking up very deeply, and more simple, accessible methods to facilitate that. And that's what we're doing. Yeah. But as far as work specifically, I do get asked that, like, how is it to work, with no sense of space or time, or a sense of separate self or anything. It's actually quite easy. It's much more sort of effortless than it was years ago. Um, Things get so simple. So what's right in front of your face is all there is. There's just nothing. There's just that. There's just that. There's no way it could be other. No need for it to be other. No need to construct a self to imagine it could be other. And so things get so simple and singular and obviously natural, that it becomes quite effortless, I would say, overall.
Yeah, for me, the most difficult was reactivity,
Hmm.
because even before the shift, changes had already produced a certain, I think, during our ripening process, we are more and more aligned with our true self, and we just don't allow others to, step on us, or just impose their wishes or their requests on us. So I started sensing an increased reactivity, which
Hmm.
is a bit raw, because it's not regulated by ego anymore. And
Hmm.
during that period, yes, I think it was difficult to have a job, because I could have raw reactions, and usually people are not accustomed to experience that, because everyone tries to be polite or diplomatic, or
Hmm.
just talk around it.
Yeah.
And maybe because I've been doing these energetic releases, reactivity has been an issue.
Yeah.
But now I think is at least reduced substantially, and I think if I overcome reactivity, it will be a huge difference in my life at all
Yeah.
levels.
Yeah. I will say two things about that. One is, with once reactivity has subsided, the clarifying of these types of interactions, and the equanimity with which they arise or are resolved, is pretty impressive. And what's interesting is, it's not about, well, I'll just say it this way: instead of a perception that there's a me and that other person, and we have to sort this thing out, and there's a boundary issue, or there's a communication that needs to happen, it's more like a local effect. They happen together at the same time, and there's not a separation there. So it starts to feel like meta. It starts to feel much more like a movement of love. And if you wonder what I mean by that, it would take me a while to unpack what I mean by meta practice in this way. But Zubin and I, ZDoggMD, yesterday, actually, we did a live. It's on my channel. So the live we did yesterday, I went into detail about meta practice in this way, and how that plays out in interactions with other people. And it becomes profoundly enjoyable, actually. Those challenges aren't even challenges. But what happens is, when we have reactivity and we have maybe people pleasing and different things that are inauthentic in communication, when we stop doing that, often we have almost like, we have better boundaries, but we can be a little rigid with boundaries, or we almost overcompensate by being a little too direct. And then what happens is, over time, we learn to soften that, but we still have good boundaries, and we're still communicating authentically. And then what happens is, we just find this equanimity with people, with situations, and it's very flexible, it's very fluid. And that's what I found. But that's subtle stuff that actually only really starts to happen, I think, in deep stage realization. But that's the wonderful challenge of being a human being and being alive and carrying this into the world.
Great. I will see that video.
Yeah, yeah. It was fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Angelo.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. People are going to get so much out of this. And thanks for your time. And definitely stay in touch and let me know how everything is going.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay. You take
Okay.
care.